Hello everyone, Bashrop here. In this video, we'll go over the most dangerous afflictions in the game. All these afflictions are much less scary once you know how to deal with them. The first one are everyone's favorite parasites. You can get parasites risk by eating predator meat, and the more you eat, the faster the risk increases. Size of the meat does not matter, even eating one partially is the same as consuming a whole 1 kilo steak. Only wolf and bear meat counts as predator meat. Cougar meat does not give parasites, though that might change when the cougar is reworked. Stalker pie also increases parasite risk in theory, however it requires cooking 5 to make, and cooked food never gives parasite risk with cooking level 5, so unless you're playing on misery, it doesn't matter. Raw predator meat increases the parasite chance by 75%, and it's always a bad idea to eat, as not even cooking level 5 can save you there. You roll the chance to get parasites exactly 24 hours after you get parasites risk, unless you reach 100% parasite risk before that, in which case you just get parasites instantly. If you do get parasites, you'll have to take medicine daily in order to treat it. Know that the day starts at midnight when it comes to healing parasites, so you don't have to necessarily take your dose exactly every 24 hours. You could take one just before midnight and another one just after midnight. But it's best to always take them at the same time of the day, so that you build up a routine and don't forget your daily dose. You will lose 2% of your max condition and 4% of your max fatigue each day, meaning if you forget to take your dose too many times, you will be permanently exhausted and eventually die. But the timer is pretty forgiving, so even if you take a dose only every other day, you can still survive. Also, remember that on Endless Night, parasites are a death sentence. The day never properly resets, since you can take another dose until next midnight, but in Endless Night mode it's always midnight and time doesn't move. So make sure to never eat predator meat before you reach cooking 5 on Endless Night runs. There are some positives to parasites. You can't get 2 parasite afflictions at the same time, so while you're curing parasites, you're free to eat all the predator meat you want. It won't make the affliction worse or anything. Parasites also let you sleep when you're not tired, which makes it easier to pass time or to conserve calories. This can be a great way to hibernate for long periods. Broken ribs take a while to heal just like parasites, but work quite differently. Generally, broken ribs are not as dangerous, as you could theoretically keep the affliction forever and not die. Just make sure you don't get stuck in an area where you have to climb a rope to get out, such as the valley in HRV, as you cannot climb ropes with broken ribs. If you do find yourself in such situation, you can still make it out by using a stim. Unlike parasites, you can get broken ribs multiple times, and the affliction takes longer to heal each time. Wearing a ballistic vest while getting moose stomped lowers the recovery time by 30%. Even though broken ribs are not as dangerous as parasites, they can be a lot more annoying to heal, since you need lots of sleep, but with broken ribs you cannot oversleep if you're not tired. There is a trick around this, however. You could get hypothermia on purpose, which makes you tired very quickly, allowing you to sleep through the most of the day. You will get your lost condition from being cold for a couple hours back very quickly, since you'll be sleeping all the time. After sleeping for almost a day, you should freeze for a short bit again to prevent curing hypothermia. This will reset the hypothermia timer back, and you can sleep for another day and then repeat until broken ribs are cured. Note that if you want to hibernate like this, you'll need a bunch of water and food ready. You also need to do this in a cave in order to avoid cabin fever. Speaking of cabin fever and avoiding it, One of the new feats, Settled Mind, lets you completely avoid cabin fever, so if you really don't like dealing with it, consider picking the feat. But even without the feat, cabin fever is not that hard to manage. Cabin fever risk is determined by how much time you spend indoors in the last 150 hours. The risk will pop up if you spend at least 113 hours inside, and if you spend over 125 hours inside, you get cabin fever, which prevents you from passing time inside in any way, including crafting, cooking, and of course sleeping. There's one way to still pass time inside, even with cabin fever, in case you get it when the weather outside is horrible. You can simply harvest clothing or items and cancel the progress before finishing. This rolling average over the last 150 hours is why you sometimes see cabin fever risk going up even when spending time outside. Based on these thresholds, you really don't need to spend that much time outside to avoid cabin fever. As little as 4 hours per day is enough. Or you could spend an entire day outside once every 6 days, and then you can spend the other 5 days inside. What counts as inside is mostly straightforward. It's basically all buildings that give you warmth bonus, and caves that have a loading screen when entered, such as Cinder Hills Mine or the Langston Mine. Small caves with no loading screens, fishing huts, or cars do not count as inside. For some reason, the shack next to the maintenance shed in Broken Railroad also counts as outside, despite clearly being a building and giving warmth bonus, and is probably the most convenient place in the game to deal with cabin fever. There's currently a bug with how cabin fever is calculated that can either benefit you greatly, instantly removing your cabin fever risk, or prevent you from curing cabin fever even when outside. The bug involves the back part of caves. If you have cabin fever risk and walk into the back part of a cave, your risk will be instantly healed and you won't get any cabin fever risk for the next 5 or more days. But if you already do have cabin fever, this will not work anymore, and instead any time spent in the back part of the cave will not count as time outside, which makes healing cabin fever much trickier. Luckily, there's still a way around this. If you're sleeping when the 24-hour timer ends, cabin fever will still heal that way. You can also actually spend time outside caves if you want to, which should still work properly. Another dangerous affliction we're talking about is Frostbite, which works very differently from the first three. The affliction itself is a lot more simple. If you get Frostbite, your maximum condition is permanently lowered by 10%. That's it. The dangerous part is that this is the only affliction in the game that cannot be cured and is permanent for the rest of the run. Preventing Frostbite is quite straightforward, though how Frostbite risk works has a bit more depth to it. Different body parts get Frostbite at different rates. You only start getting Frostbite risk on uncovered body parts when the temperature drops below -20 Celsius, and the colder it gets, the faster the risk spikes. There are two exceptions. First, if you're wearing fully frozen clothing on your innermost slot for any body part, you can get Frostbite at any temperature below 1 degree, and you'll get it even faster than not wearing anything at all. Second, if you're near a fire, you heal Frostbite regardless of temperature. There are limits to how fast you can develop or heal Frostbite risk, so warming up near a forge is not gonna help any more than any reasonably warm fire. And when you get Frostbite, there is no cure, except cheating death. If you die and choose the temporary penalty, you will heal Frostbite and any other affliction you were struggling with before death, once the temporary penalty goes away. Scurvy is one of the newer afflictions that quite a few people seem to be struggling with. Scurvy is tied purely to your vitamin C levels. When you start a new game, you start with your vitamin C levels maxed out, and you lose some vitamin C every day. The amount depends on the difficulty. Once your vitamin C levels get low enough, you get scurvy risk as a warning. A lot of people seem to try to heal scurvy risk ASAP when they get it, and then they seem to have it come back every day. This happens when your vitamin C levels are barely above the risk threshold, so if you only eat enough vitamin C to make the risk go away, the risk is bound to come back the next day. In order to not worry about scurvy risk for a while, you need to build your vitamin C levels back up, which is a long-term process. There are many vitamin C rich foods in the game, but sooner or later you will run out of them, and the main way to deal with scurvy will be eating fish. You can catch enough fish to deal with scurvy in a day or less if you use the right technique. If you let your vitamin C drop to zero, you get scurvy, and the only way to heal it is to increase your vitamin C levels all the way to the maximum value again. The penalties of scurvy are quite significant, but it's actually possible to survive forever with scurvy, since the condition loss can be out-healed by sleeping for 10 hours at a time pretty easily, even on Interloper. There's even one advantage to keeping scurvy. Your vitamin C levels do not drop while you have scurvy, so you can use this to your advantage when trying to save vitamin C food, and getting your vitamin C levels back up will be easier than when you're fighting off scurvy risk. Do not underestimate the stamina drain penalty from scurvy. It's the only affliction that applies this penalty even during rope climbing. In some cases, you could find yourself out of stamina even with crampons. Severe Lacerations is possibly the scariest looking affliction in the game. The only way to get it is to get in a struggle with a cougar. Cougar's being reworked and will be added back soon, though it's possible the affliction might work differently when it's back. Severe Lacerations drop your maximum condition by 50% and periodically give you blood loss and infection risk for 72 hours, then it just heals itself. It was a very scary affliction to get at release, and you could very easily just get blood loss while sleeping or passing time and bleed out very quickly. But the affliction isn't actually nearly as dangerous as it first seemed, because you actually don't start bleeding out randomly. It always happens in 12-hour intervals and there is no randomness to it. So you know exactly when you will start bleeding out and can plan sleeping around it. Of course, even knowing the blood loss is not random, you shouldn't underestimate severe lacerations. There were ways to avoid getting severe lacerations in the first place. They might not work anymore once they add the cougar back, but I'll get back to severe lacerations and the new cougar mechanics in a future video anyway. Suffocation is a special affliction which you can get only in two locations: Last Prospect Mine in Blackrock or Langston Mine in Zone of Contamination. These mines have toxic gas in some areas, and if you stand in those areas, you get suffocation risk measured in real-time seconds. If you run out of time, you get this suffocation affliction, which kills you immediately. There is no way to cure it, and it doesn't matter what your condition is, the death is instant. So you need to make sure that you can make it out of the toxic areas before you suffocate. Equipping a gas mask will let you walk through the toxic areas safely, as long as you have canisters. Note that the canisters run out relatively quickly and are rare, especially outside the zone of contamination. A good way to save canisters is to start walking through a toxic area without a mask on, until you almost run out of the time, and only then, if you're still not safe, you put the mask on. Another tip to get more from the canisters is to simply move faster. Remember that the canisters deplete in real time, not in-game time. So you can sprint until you're out of stamina, then pass time for a little bit and sprint again. That way you can cover more area before the canister depletes. Just don't ever try this without the respirator, you will suffocate very quickly. Never waste canisters in toxic areas on the surface, as those give you only chemical poisoning, which is not actually as bad as it sounds and is more comparable to the Burns affliction. The gas mask is not actually necessary to make it through most toxic areas in the mines either, especially the last prospect mine only has one toxic corridor that you can safely walk through when not encumbered. And even Langstone mine, while much more toxic, requires the gas mask on the first floor only, where the toxic area is too long to even sprint through. So make sure to spare some canisters if you want to explore this area. Everywhere else, when not encumbered and with full energy, the gas mask should just stay in your inventory as a backup in case of emergency. In short, to stay safe from suffocation, just remember these 3 rules. Never explore toxic areas encumbered or tired. While your suffocation risk is under 50%, you can always turn around and return to a safe area in time. And if you're nearly out of time and about to suffocate, that's when you put the mask on instead of wearing it from the start. Even though not as dangerous as other afflictions, food poisoning, dysentery and infection deserve a special mention. They all work somewhat similar, but there are subtle differences between them. Infection is probably the most dangerous of the 3, since it's easy to forget about infection risk after a struggle, as there are usually more pressing matters, and then die in your sleep later once the infection develops. Food poisoning cannot actually kill you, and dysentery is very easy to avoid. Just never keep any unsafe water around. That's everything for now. Thank you for watching.